2024 is the year of the 3G apocalypse. Carriers around the world are beginning to shut down their 3G networks to make way for 4G, 5G, and even 6G. In some countries like Australia and Singapore, 2G networks have already been shut down, rendering 3G phones near useless. As 3G is just weeks away from being shut down in Singapore, I want to take a look back at one of the pioneering 3G phones, the Motorola E1000. The E1000 was amongst the earliest mainstream 3G phones sold on GSM networks when released in 2004. As a phone on the bleeding edge of technology, the price was correspondingly high. With all the cutting-edge specs you could want for 2005, it's no surprise that like many early 3G phones, it's relatively big and bulky, and has multiple quirks and features. They, however, were much more tolerable in the feature phone era than today. From the front, notice the directional joystick being wedged between the numpad rather than above it. Fortunately, this doesn't compromise its usability, nor does it affect typing all that much. The next quirk are the 8 buttons surrounding the screen itself, the volume keys, call and keys, and shortcut keys. Perhaps the Motorola designers were inspired by the side-mounted keys of the Siemens SX1 and the Nokia 7600, although they were evidently much more restrained. Finally, like most Motorola phones of the time, there are 3 physical soft keys on top of the keypad. Most phones don't have more than 2. The center soft key is similar to right-click on the computer most of the time, but confusingly, center-clicking the joystick corresponds to the left soft key rather than the center soft key as you might expect. Overlook the quirks in 2005, however, and you'll be treated to a visual treat of a screen. 2.3-inch QVGA doesn't sound much today, but in 2005, these were high-end specs for a keypad phone display, and there were stereo speakers on the side to add to its multimedia credentials.
Hello, Moto.
Like many early 3G phones, the E1000 places a design emphasis on its VGA front-facing camera. No, it wasn't designed for selfies, but rather for video calling. Carriers at the time thought that people would pay them the privilege to make video calls, which in practice never really took off. And the rear camera was also high-end for its time, 1.3 megapixels with a flash. Connectivity-wise, you have a 2.5mm audio jack. I'm not sure why they didn't go for the more established 3.5mm standard, but unfortunately the output is in mono on one side, which dents its multimedia capabilities quite significantly. Charging and data is handled by a proprietary connector, just as Motorola was beginning to move towards the mini USB standard with the Razr V3. Powering the E1000 is an 820 mAh battery. But there are 2 things beneath it that are even more significant. Firstly, it was one of the earliest phones to adopt the now ubiquitous microSD cards, so early that they were still commonly referred to as TransFlash. Motorola itself had a role in the creation of the card standard. And secondly, notice that it was made in Singapore. If you didn't know by now that made is from Singapore, and that personally makes the E1000 a bit more special to me. Unfortunately, Motorola's manufacturing plant in Singapore closed down for good in 2008, as it was struggling to compete after over-reliance on the Razr during the mid-2000s. Turning to the user interface, it's pretty much standard Motorola fare for its time. What I want to highlight most is how the phone represents a telco-centric 3G vision that never really took off. By default, the internet shortcut key directs to the telco's own internet portal, which in this case is Singtel's Ideas. The idea was that consumers would purchase or subscribe to multimedia content curated and delivered by their telcos from these 3G portals alone. Such portals, if they ever worked out, mostly became obsolete in the 4G era where the full internet became much more accessible. While phone calls still work over 3G in Singapore, it's impossible to get any website working on this antique wireless access protocol browser from 2005. SMSs can be received, but it may take a while for them to be delivered. And for a phone that was sold as a harbinger of the 3G multimedia experience, the actual experience of handling offline multimedia is somewhat lacking, at least by my 2024 standards. Firstly, Bluetooth support is quite primitive. It does not support file transfers nor pairing with wireless headsets. Processing multimedia files is also quite slow. You'll see loading screens almost every time you try to access photos and music. Furthermore, it refuses to open all but the most low-res multimedia files. Surprisingly, this phone does not have any Java apps pre-installed, which probably reflects the business-oriented nature of the device when it was new. Camera-wise, there were a few quirks in the interface to deal with. Amazingly, one can actually toggle between front and rear cameras on the fly when recording. But by default, you can only shoot up to a maximum of 15 seconds at a time. But even when switching for a maximum length allowed, you can only shoot for a maximum of 3 minutes at a time regardless of the amount of memory you have. Lastly, when capturing photos or video, there is no option to directly save into the gallery. Instead, you have to either discard the photo itself or to choose from a range of confusing options. And that's the Motorola E1000, one of the pioneering mainstream 3G phones. While not as well remembered as its Nokia counterparts, in retrospect it did give us a preview of a multimedia-focused future. Although its multimedia chops were laughably primitive even by the standards of 5 years later, it did pioneer the now ubiquitous microSD card at the very least. Here's part 2 where I will demonstrate the ringtones, wallpaper, and more inside this phone. So please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe as it helps me very much as a small-time VTuber, and do follow my Twitch and Twitter as well. Thank you, and I'll see you soon in the next video.